Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Guardians of the Republic. Joining me, as usual, is Tony Hughes. How are you tonight, Tony?
I'm great, Jonathan. How are you doing?
I'm doing swell.
Good.
Another
Good to be
7
here.
days have transpired, so what lunacy awaits us now? I'll let you
Well,
pick a topic.
it doesn't seem to be as crazy. Well, it's not as crazy, I guess, as it was last week. So maybe the war's winding down. I think that we're still a lot to talk about, always is. But probably the most interesting thing to me that happened this past week was Trump kind of tacoing again as far as the war was concerned, with oil prices skyrocketing and you know the and really the bond market kind of melted down on Friday.
Yeah.
A lot of people did a lot of there wasn't a lot of coverage on it because people don't really understand what the bond market is doing. But the 10-year Treasury jumped up over 4.5% again. It was almost as high as it was after Liberation Day back in April of last year. And you might recall that where that the Trump always chickens out acronym came from was really when the bond market, the credit markets almost locked up. There were people selling out of American bonds like crazy, and the liquidity in that market started to dry up. It was really driving interest rates up. And that's when that was the first time Trump backed off of those insane tariffs that he came. Remember that he had the chart up that, he had some weird formula that how he had come up with that didn't make any sense. Once people realized that it didn't make any sense, they was just arbitrary numbers, and then the credit market started melting down. And the 10, for people that don't realize, the 10-year Treasury is really the rate that most investors follow to price 30-year conventional mortgage loans. So when that 10-year Treasury starts to increase, you're going to see the 30-year conventional mortgage rate creep up as well. And what's happening is that investors who are supplying the money for these mortgages start getting worried about inflation. And inflation is the worst enemy of a bondholder. You invest money, you buy a 30-year bond, and even if it's a 30, or you buy a 30-year mortgage, or you invest in a 30-year mortgage, usually through Fannie Mae bonds.
Mhm.
You buy that mortgage. Now, the mortgage typically does not last 30 full years. By the time, because people sell their houses, they move, they refinance.
Right.
Generally speaking, most mortgages have usually 10 years as the average rate. And that's why they kind of track that 10-year Treasury, because it is a risk-free interest rate, because it is the United States government debt. But when you see those rates start going up and up and up, that means mortgage rates are going up and up and up. And it's that fear, it's that expectation of inflation that drives that rate. And of course, the whole thing with Trump this last term is affordability. And, he's been pounding on Jerome Powell to lower interest rates, lower interest rates. Well, here's a perfect example of it's not really up to Jerome Powell. The market, the investors drive interest rates,
Right.
and it's their expectations is how they price it. So now they see gasoline going up, diesel's over $5 a gallon. We're right here at planting season, which means farmers are out there with their tractors plowing up the ground. They're using their seed drills to plant crops. There's a lot of diesel fuel that they have to buy. And even though they're buying off-road diesel, that saves about 60 or 70 cents a gallon. So there's still $4, $4.50 a gallon for
Right.
off-road diesel that they're paying. This is bread. This is cattle. This is pork. This is chickens. This is corn. This is the corn that goes into ethanol that's supposed to try to keep your gas prices low.
Yeah.
And these inflationary expectations are exploding. In fact, whereas the market had been predicting 1 to 2 more rate cuts this year by the Fed,
Hmm.
all of a sudden this thinking turned around and they started thinking, well, the Fed may have to increase rates this year to
Right.
stave off inflation. Well, that's the last thing President Trump wants to see, especially as he's facing the midterms. The
Right.
last thing. And he doesn't have a plan for the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, it's painfully obvious. We can dominate Iran militarily. There's no question, but there never was any question about that. But it only takes one tanker afire in the Strait of Hormuz. It only takes one cargo ship sunk in the Strait of Hormuz.
Right.
One mine, one fast attack boat, one autonomous floating torpedo boat, whatever they have out there. And it's just impossible, virtually impossible, to eliminate all risk to the Strait of Hormuz. And the people that are trading oil futures see that. And they're
Mhm.
pricing that into oil future contracts. I mean, the oil futures contracts right now don't show any really significant price relief until February or March of next year. Prices coming down, sure, from $100 a barrel, but not back down to 60 where it was before the hostilities started. So when Trump saw the credit market start to lock up again, and he saw that 10-year creep back over 4.5%, with reminiscing back to how it was after Liberation Day, now all of a sudden, oh well, we're going to delay the attack on the power plants, which probably you could argue that's a war crime anyway. I kind of laughed and said that Trump's taking a page out of Putin's playbook in Ukraine to start attacking power plants
Right.
because this mostly affects the population. There may be obviously there's some military probably getting some use out of it, but 99% probably going to the population of Iran.
Right.
And you're making life difficult for them, and it's not exactly winning over hearts and minds if that's what you're trying to do. So,
Yeah.
but once he announced that we're going to cut a deal, they want to cut a deal, and then the credit markets relaxed, and Monday was a good day. We saw a big bounce in the stock market yesterday. Kind of pretty much a level day to day for all practical purposes.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes, but I'm telling you, Trump does not listen to anybody else in the whole wide world except for the credit market. He
Right.
listens to that credit market. Thank God he listens. He doesn't listen to Congress, doesn't listen to the Supreme Court, but he listens to credit markets.
Yeah. That's so my thinking too, beyond that is it's something he's done many times before. How do we term it? I call it the fade. But a lot of times he goes gung ho into some stupid activity and it doesn't work out. And then he kind of just ignores it and lets it kind of play out and then hope you forget about it in 3 months. And I think that's what's happening with Iran. I think he just wants you around midterms forget we ever did this, no
Yeah,
more attacks, maybe a little posturing, but this didn't work out. Let's just not say anything now and people will forget. Because I don't still don't see an end game plan. I don't see, the Iranians said we don't know what he's talking about. We're not talking.
yeah,
And now the Iranians are threatening to attack our financial sector, through cyber
yeah,
attacks. So
yeah.
uh, where in the world there, again, he never considers repercussions. He just acts because it
Let,
looks.
let me tell you, we do not understand the Islamic culture. I mean, that's just, especially the radical Islamic culture. We just don't understand it.
Yeah.
And even Trump expects people to think logically. He's been so critical of Ukraine up to the point of blaming Zelensky for the war because why would you even fight back? Russia is larger than you are. Why did you even put up a I mean he's essentially said that. In fact, he
Yeah.
has actually said that.
Oh yeah.
Why did you even put up a fight? You can't beat Russia. He has that same mentality about Iran. Why would Iran fight? Iran knows they're going to get beat. I really believe at my core that Trump believed that Iran was just going to capitulate. As soon as we attacked, Iran was going to throw their hands up and surrender and say, "Whatever you want, Donald, it's all yours. Here's our oil. Here's the strait. Here's the nuclear material. Whatever, if there's still any left." I
Yeah.
think that was the plan. I think the plan was capitulation within 2 weeks. and they haven't. They're still, I mean, now they're way degraded. There's no question that they do not have anywhere near the military strength that they had before. But as you and I have talked about, Jonathan, before, when it comes to people getting on the streets to protest, to overthrow their government, all it takes is a couple of guys with AK-47s to cut down those protesters, and
Mhm.
they're all going to go home.
Yeah.
And you can't bomb your way out of that.
No.
So this is the problem that Trump has got, and I think one reason why he's just going to proclaim victory, like you say, and hope that everybody forgets about it.
Right. There's a scene in one of my favorite movies that kinda encapsulates what you said earlier, Lawrence of Arabia, when, Alec Guinness was playing the one of the first kings, and he's got all these British generals and diplomats there, and there are all these great plans, they're taking the Middle East away from the Turks, and he's like, "We'll unite all of the Arabs under one banner," and he just looks at me like, "Who are the Arabs?" It's like back then
Yeah,
the Middle East was nothing but tribes. Even, they
yeah,
left Lawrence, they were, they got into Damascus and they just had this huge fight. One had the
yeah.
waterworks and what been out fighting the other had it was like, we don't understand after over 100 years, we don't understand the Arab mind. And we never, it was like Vietnam too, we didn't understand how their minds worked. We thought bread and butter would win them over at putting them in a strategic hamlet and protecting them from the Viet Cong when all they really wanted to do is grow rice and
Yeah.
hopefully to be older than 40, and we never get it.
But think about Trump's rhetoric 2 weeks ago, just 2 weeks ago, about the Strait, about Iran's military, unconditional surrender. Unconventional surrender. I mean, I don't know what that means to begin with. I mean, I know what it meant for the Civil War. That meant that you lay your arms down and the United States all comes back together again. That you're now under the control, that the southern states were back under the control of the federal government in Washington, D.C.
Yeah,
What does unconditional surrender by Iran mean? Well, we're not talking about unconditional surrender now.
yeah,
I mean, Trump yesterday said um, joint control of the strait. And in fact, it was a question that Caitlin Collins from CNN asked him. Uh, I think he was getting on the airplane when he was leaving Memphis yesterday. Um, she said, well, what does that mean? Who would be controlling? He said, well, maybe me. And he said, how about that? Me and you and Iran. And he said, yeah, well, me and the Ayatollah, whoever it is. And I happen to think, did he just give away some information there? Because if you're talking to, as he put it, the right people in Iran to cut this deal
mhm.
on a surrender, wouldn't the Ayatollah have to be part of that? I mean,
I don't know,
he's the supreme leader.
the
I
president
mean,
of, South Vietnam wasn't part of the Paris Peace Accords that supposedly ended the Vietnam War, you know?
yeah, but South Vietnam's not Iran though. I mean, the Ayatollah kind of ran
Yeah,
everything, and today Trump said, well, it kind of is regime change. Well, maybe we don't know, but of course we don't know who's running it. We know that they're still putting up a fight. We know they're still in control of the strait,
yeah,
but you can't call it regime change if it's just a personnel change. If it's still the same regime and they still have the ideology of that radical, violent Islamic culture,
yeah.
death to America, death to Israel, that they've had since 1979, um, it's not regime change just
Well,
because there's somebody new in the seat.
too, the last time we got an unconditional surrender, W landed on a carrier under a banner "Mission Accomplished," but you know what? 15 years later, we're still there and taking casualties.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what scares me the most about Iran is,
No, the last time we had unconditional surrender was against Japan and Germany.
well, they claimed
I
that
mean,
with, Iraq, but it didn't prove
no,
true.
it wasn't Iraq. It wasn't Iraq. I mean, Iraq fell. Well, it was surrender to the United States,
The
but then Iraq
government
fell
and the
into a civil.
military surrendered, but
They fell into a civil war, and Afghanistan fell into a civil war, and Iran coming attractions. How can it not be a civil war? I mean, it either the guys with the guns are going to stay in control, which is the current regime,
yeah,
or somehow the less extremist folks in Iran are going to get weapons, and so they can at least protect themselves, if not actually physically overthrow what's left of that government.
right,
I think there's a lot yet to happen in Iran. I lived these Middle East wars, the bulk of my adult life,
yeah,
and I got news for you. Just because our military has accomplished their military objectives does not mean that the war is over.
no,
We've got a Marine Expeditionary Unit, 2,200 Marines with equipment headed there right now. Trump today authorized or activated the 82nd Airborne to go somewhere over there. So we're going to have some boots on the ground. I got news for you.
yeah, but,
And
Iran is also different from Iraq in that Iraq was more of a secular state. In fact, with the
absolutely.
Saddam
Yeah.
Hussein and most of them being part of the Ba'ath coalition,
Yep.
he didn't like the terrorists. That was why I
Yeah.
knew that was bullshit then was like, he's not supporting terrorism. He's killing those people in his country. He doesn't like
Yeah.
Iran is
Iran
a
had been,
theocracy.
Iran and Iraq had been what, a 10-year war
Uh-huh.
before we went into Iraq?
Yep. But
So yeah, he
Iran
fought
is a
Iran.
theocracy and it's they believe wholeheartedly in again, if you want to kill Iranians, that's what they
Yeah.
want. They want to go
Yeah.
see Allah and the 70 virgins, and they want
Yeah.
to take out as many infidels as possible on the way out. So you're not really accomplishing anything, except
Yeah.
that Iran has a much larger population than Iraq, and fundamentalists from
Mhm.
other countries will flood in there to assist. To keep people keep forgetting the people that attacked us on 9/11 were Saudis. They weren't
Yep.
Iraq, they weren't Egyptian, they were Saudis.
Yeah.
Same with, in Iraq, and Afghanistan, a lot of those people weren't from those countries. They were fundamentalists and
Yep.
came from other countries, kind of like mercenaries, but it's common cause. So if you got a
Yep.
country that already has millions of fundamentalists in it and then a few more million come in and we put boots on the ground, it's Afghanistan and Iraq times 50. We won't be able to send our troops out in public because of the bombs, the anti-personnel, they'll strap a dynamite on a little kid and run him in the middle of a crowd. It's,
Well, there's a reason why after 9/11 we called it the global war on terror, because it
yeah,
was a global war. It was everywhere. It was in the Philippines. I mean, it was North Africa, Central Africa, the Middle East, Syria, Lebanon, Ethiopia. It's literally been everywhere.
right.
I think, obviously, and there's no question Iran is a big reason for that. They help finance some of this, but I just don't think that once Iran is gone, it's just going to be over with. I mean, it's
No,
nice to think it, but we got to see if Iran goes away first. I think I just,
yeah,
I do not feel comfortable that Trump has thought it through. I think that the
I don't think
military
he
thought
has.
it through. And if you do believe the reports that have come out, that the obviously anonymous sources, but supposedly the military had a lot of misgivings about going into Iran because of the history. And the military certainly knows. I mean, the military absolutely knows you cannot have regime change unless you have people on the street. You have to take it from 30,000 feet down to 6 feet. And if you're going to have a regime change, I thought this afternoon, and I don't know, Jonathan. I don't know how would you feel if you knew that it did not matter what came out of your mouth, no matter how big of a lie it was, that the 99% of your supporters were going to believe every word of it,
Mhm.
even if you said something completely opposite 3 days earlier, it wouldn't matter. You had such control over the minds of people that of your supporters,
Mhm.
no matter what you said, 99% is going to slurp it up like Kool-Aid. I don't know how I would feel about that. I mean,
Well
it's just like that's just like too much power for one man to have. But
well, my thing
that's
is, do you remember an old movie from the '50s called, Facing the Crowd? Andy Griffith?
I've heard of it. I don't remember anything about it. I think I have heard
So,
of it.
it was very ahead of its time movie. Andy Griffith is this hick that they kind of find out in the middle of nowhere. Patricia Neal's a TV producer, and they thought it'd be great to bring him in and kind of be the bumpkin, having a little variety talk show on the radio and then TV. And then he turns into this mega star, and he creates almost a cult. And I mean, literally, like people are they're talking about running him for Senate and future president. And Patricia Neal knows I've created this monster. And then finally, at the end of the movie, she breaks into the studio's control room and turns the mic back on while he thinks he's off stage talking about how stupid his followers are and how,
Mhm.
and tearing them up. And that's the tip. He loses all credibility. I've been waiting for that face in the crowd moment for over 10 years. And even if Trump were to, like, you're all morons and fools, they do that, that's
Yeah.
how bad it is. You're correct. And it's that
Because
disconnect.
because we're your moron, Donald President Trump. We're your fool, President Trump.
Exactly.
We love you.
And then, so they will come up with any way to spin anything he does or say. That leads into one of the other things I want to bring up because it happened like the day after our last podcast. But Joe Kent resigned, said there was no imminent threat. And, that he was the guy that Trump should have relied on to make that assessment. And he didn't. He went against it. And then immediately all the Trump worshipers went on the attack where Joe Kent used to be kind of an icon. Now he's the pariah, just like so many others that's come out and said there was no imminent threat, and
Well,
it was
Jonathan, the day after Kent resigned, Tulsi Gabbard went to Congress and testified
yeah,
and presented their periodic testimony. And in her written statements, like on the sixth page of her written remarks, it said Iran's nuclear capability is not an imminent threat to the United States.
right. So again,
She forgot to read that part in her oral presentation. That was kind of
right.
interesting. She said she cut her remarks down because she thought it was going to run long. That was pretty important. That's a pretty important spot to eliminate. But of course, they explained it away. Well, it's not really the director of national intelligence's job to determine what is imminent. So
I guess
and
only
apparently
Donald
we all
Trump's
have
club had to make that
and
decision.
exactly, exactly. The dictionary definition of imminent is irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's whatever imminence, whatever the president says it is.
Yeah. And
Anyway, I didn't
even
mean to cut you off, but
No, no, and it's and it's back to that chicken and egg thing that still they can't explain is, well, you said you wiped out their nuclear capabilities last year. So how are they all of a sudden
no, it
capable
was
of
obliterated. It was
okay,
obliterated. That's
yeah,
another
exactly.
word. That's another definition we struggle with.
Yeah,
Imminent and obliterate.
exactly. And it's and that immediately they spun it again. Well, no, we did, but they must have had other laboratories and they were working in other but that's not what you
Guess what
told
we
us
haven't
last
talked.
year.
Guess what we haven't talked about in 3 weeks though.
What's that?
Epstein.
Well, of course, that's which is funny because overseas, those investigations are taking on more steam. Now, Prince Andrew's daughters are under implication and they're widening the investigation. In fact, they've actually had some of their privileges taken away. So,
Wow.
and there's the issue with the was it the royal family of Norway or Denmark? I can't remember which. Same thing, and there's a princess over there, and she's having honors and privileges taken away. So every country on earth is taking this seriously except MAGA world.
Yep.
And how can you just not come to conclusion that it's happening because they're protecting one person.
Yeah, it's did you ever see the movie Wag the Dog?
Mhm.
Such a great movie.
Yeah.
And it's like we're living it now.
Yeah.
Of course, it was really kinda made to sort of make fun of Bill Clinton and his, all the
Yeah.
issues he had now while he was in office. But, I mean, we're right there again. I mean,
Yeah.
couldn't you see a remake of Wag the Dog with a character of Trump as the president? And so they're saying, okay, he's got the Epstein and he's got his other scandals. And it's like, let's get a good war. Of course, in this case, it's a hot war. It's not a
Yeah.
fake war like Wag the Dog was. This is
Right.
an honest God war now.
There was another movie too about that time period. It was more of a comedy, but I think it was the last movie John Candy made before he passed. But it was called Canadian Bacon. Alan Alda was the president, and their whole point was to cover up a multitude of sins. Let's declare war on Canada. And not really, literally, but like, they started denigrating Canadians and don't eat Canadian bacon and all that stuff. They had this TV ad that showed like all these they're in your midst and it showed all these Canadian actors and like musicians like Rush and everything. Like Canadian maple syrup was oozing down the screen as like and it was an imminent threat. I think that's the way they put it, and John Candy and Rhea Perlman and someone else thwarted the whole thing in Toronto. I mean, it was it was a comedy, but it didn't really miss the mark too much. And of course,
And our
Trump's
biggest enemy now in the trade wars is Canada and Great Britain. So
Mhm,
there you go.
yep, who neither of which are going to lend us a hand in this Iranian mess that we started.
I think Great Britain finally started letting us use their bases for at least our aircraft.
Well, I think that's because Iran launched a missile into Diego Garcia, which is a joint base. Britain was kind of attacked, and you know the history since World War II. US says jump, Great Britain says how high,
Yep.
that's they've been kind of growing a little more backbone recently, but I think it only goes so far. It never ends. The other part is Robert Mueller passes away, and what does the orange tornado hit on Twitter while he's sitting on his toilet at 3 o'clock at night?
Good. I'm glad he's dead.
That he's dead.
Glad he's dead.
And then the immediate hypocrisy of that was all of the attacks they put on anybody that said anything about Charlie Kirk, So, God, guys, make up
Did
your
you did you
minds.
happen to hear did you happen to hear Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent Sunday? He was on Meet the Press,
He's
and
been on
I
there a
can't
lot
remember
lately.
the lady's name. I know she's dark hair and maybe Hispanic type features, but she's the moderator, and I can't call her name right now. She's good though, and she was pressing him on what Trump said.
Yeah.
And Besant's defense of Trump was, even though, I mean, Robert Mueller actually, in my opinion, helped Trump. I mean, he did not find any direct evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. He did not indict Trump.
Mhm.
He didn't invite any of Trump's closest people. They did indict some Russians for trying to influence the election, but and of course, Bueller was old. He was infirm when he took this job. He probably shouldn't have taken it, but he was asked to. He
Yeah.
certainly had a wonderful history as far as being a combat decorated Marine, which means he volunteered to go to Vietnam, Bronze Star of Valor, Purple Heart.
Yep.
The FBI director appointed by George Bush just before 9/11, led the FBI for 10 years for Bush's term and into Clinton's term. By all reports, did a fantastic job with the FBI.
Right.
When he came to Congress to defend his report, it was clear that he did not have he wasn't having a good day. As an
Yeah.
old guy, he was not having a good day. He was not sharp. He was not on it. And it was kind of a sad conclusion to his career public service. And I had 42 year in banking. I've got enemies. I
Yeah.
made people mad. People wanted loans that we turned down. And yeah, I mean, that's just kind of goes. I think anybody that's ever accomplished anything in life made some enemies along the way. I mean, I sleep well at night because I know that even if somebody may not like me now, at least in my heart, I did the right thing.
Right.
It might not have been what they wanted me to do, but I did what I thought was right. My conscience is clear. If I find out they're dead one day, I'm not going to say a word. I may blast somebody today if they're still alive because they
Mhm.
can defend themselves. But after you're dead, after an enemy is dead, they can't defend themselves anymore. They can't give their side of the
No.
story anymore. So if you're happy that they're dead, which I think is kind of sick, but if you are happy, I'm glad he's dead, just keep it to yourself. You don't have to go on social media and tell the whole wide world how happy you are that one of your enemies died.
Right.
And I go back to Trump's remarks at Charlie Kirk's funeral, which I mean, I was not a fan of Charlie Kirk. I think I've discussed him before,
Mhm.
and I felt like his funeral was not a religious service at all. It was a campaign. I
Yep.
mean, they turned it into a political forum. But Trump even said, the one thing I disagree with Charlie Clerk. Charlie Clerk wants to love his enemies. I hate my enemies. I hate my enemies, quote unquote. And and this kind of walks into what we're doing right now with DHS funding and the Save Act. If you don't mind going down that path with me just for a minute, but
Yeah.
I saw John Kennedy, senator from Louisiana, yesterday on Fox, the Will Cain show, saying, Ted Cruz and I came up with a solution. We go ahead and fund everything in the except ICE and Border Patrol, just like the Democrats want. We can have the TSA agents paid by the end of the week. And then we come back and we fund ICE and Border Patrol with reconciliation, because you don't have to have 60 votes that way. You do it just like they did the big beautiful bill. It's a budget maneuver
Right.
that they can legitimately get around the filibuster if they go into reconciliation. And so they went to John Thune. John Thune agreed. John Thune took it to the president, and the president quashed it and said, quote, I don't want to make a deal with the Democrats. So look, it's political. This whole business about TSA, and the Democrats they've tried to put legislation on the floor several times to say, let's fund TSA, let's fund the cybersecurity, let's fund the Coast Guard. We just don't want to fund ICE. We don't want to fund Border Patrol until we work out these issues with how ICE has been operating.
Right.
And they can't get it to the floor because Trump says no. And Kennedy was actually very defeated when he was talking to Will Cain to say, I don't know whether the president might veto it. I don't know. But at least we could do something to try to bring a compromise together,
Yeah.
and then we can still get what we want. We can still get what we want. It just takes an extra step. Trump wouldn't do it. Then this morning I heard, well, Trump will do it. And then about 3 o'clock this afternoon, I heard, I
Taco
think I actually saw.
Tuesday.
I think I saw a Truth Social post from Trump that says we're not making a deal with the Democrats. So Trump said no, then he said yes, then he said no again,
Taco
and
Tuesday.
there's still nothing happening
I know.
because, and see what Trump wanted to do. I think what Trump then wanted to do was he wants to throw Save Act, transsexual surgery. He's got like 10 things he wants to throw into this DHS funding issue.
Right.
And they wants to try to do it all through reconciliation. And I don't pretend to know how you do that. I mean, I can understand reconciliation, a budget issue,
Yeah.
how we're just going to adjust a budget, but how you actually get honest to God legislation passed where you're actually making laws through
Right.
reconciliation doesn't sound right to me. But I don't know. I don't know the rules of the Senate that well. But
I've never been able to figure
so
all
it's
that.
still, so at least as of tonight at 8:41 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday, TSA issue still unresolved. And
Well,
even though there's support with Republicans in the Senate to fix it, and there's support with the Democrats in the Senate to fix it, the president does not want to deal with it. He does not want to cut a deal.
but have you seen, so Trump's way of solving this issue is saying, I'm going to send in agents to take the place of TSA agents at airports. Now, not only does that sound scary, but multiple news sources and pundits have posted the fact that that's actually a paragraph in Project 2025 because TSA
Really?
agents are unionized, agents are not. The grand plan, and it's spelled out right in that book that everybody swears Trump doesn't approve of, but he's got Stephen Miller implementing it step by step, is privatization of TSA. And so, how's the best way to do that? Is bring in all these ICE agents who aren't union, turn them over to a corporation one of Trump's cronies own, or maybe who knows, the junior might own it. But then Trump has his own private, personal militia, really, kind of what DeSantis did in Florida.
Well, he
The
kinda already has that with
but
TSA already.
I know, but I mean, well, TSA still is answerable
I
for
mean,
a
I'm
lot of
sorry,
different
with
reasons.
ICE, he has that already with ICE, I think.
But I mean, if he's going to interject him into other facets of life, it's just insane. It's the thing is I had this conversation ad nauseum with Republicans going into 2024 and about Project 2025. Like, oh well, he doesn't agree with that. He said he had nothing to do with that. That's not what we're seeing, which we knew was going to happen.
I have to confess, I have a good friend who is a very liberal Democrat,
Hmm.
sent me this stuff about Project 2025 about 6 months before the presidential election, and I looked into it, and I wrote her back and said, "This is the most ridiculous stuff I've ever seen in my entire life. There's just no way that any of this is gonna be implemented." Boy, was I wrong. I
Yeah.
was as I would say, I am butt-face wrong. So, yeah, they're almost checking off the list of Project
I don't know. I think
2025.
there's one of the watchdog groups has them at almost two-thirds complete, and some
Yeah,
of the last stuff's pretty scary. Well, even that came up last week. One of the 20 Project 2025 people besides Stephen Miller was highlighting, you know, the whole woman's place is in the home, barefoot and pregnant. She doesn't need to vote.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, what are we just talking about with the SAVE Act? Is if your maiden name on your birth certificate doesn't match your name on your driver's license, you can't vote.
yeah.
And the thing that's scary about it is we know who Donald Trump is, but to know that there are forces out there who are trying to manipulate our republic and turn it into something different, that's what's scary. And of course, when you've got someone like Trump who has an army of sycophants at his beck and call, it gets scarier. So,
And then you get back to it doesn't matter what you say or how many times you change positions, they're gonna believe 100% of what you say no matter what.
exactly,
And that's a
exactly.
scary because when the public loses their ability to critically think about things and to independently make up their mind. I used to way back when, 15 years ago, when Fox News was really coming on strong and being heavily watched by people, and their motto was, we report, you decide. And to some extent, they did try to show both sides of the story without taking a side. Boy, that went out the window. That's been out the window for probably 3 years now.
Well, it's been
And
longer than that.
they have been well, they probably have, probably through Trump's first term, honestly. They have been sewing the bag for Trump, even though Trump gets mad at them. And when Trump gets mad at them, they see viewership leave
Yeah.
because they know the only people that watch it regularly are MAGA people.
Yep.
And so and I watch them because I'm just trying to say, because know your enemy. MAGA is the enemy.
Well, I mean,
MAGA is the enemy of the Republican Party. I see them as the enemy. I see them as an existential threat to the Republican Party because I'm not sure the Republican Party is going to recover from MAGA when it's all said and done. So I do listen. I watch CNN. I watch MS Now. I watch NBC. I watch ABC. I watch CBS. I watch Fox because I want to see, because the truth lies in the middle there somewhere.
yeah,
And
that's my
and
motto.
and let me tell you, if all you do is listen to Fox, you're getting about a third of the truth.
If
Trust
that.
me. And if you look, and honestly, probably the most balanced I've seen now lately, to me at least, is CNN. I mean, CNN, they will have Scott Jennings on with Abby Phillip at 9 o'clock, the 9 o'clock show, who is, I mean, Scott's about as dyed-in-the-wool MAGA guy as you possibly can, although he does occasionally disagree with Trump. They asked him last night about the comments about Robert Mueller, and that's what Scott said. Look, if you can't say something good, just don't say anything at all. I
Exactly.
really wish the president had not said anything at all.
Yep.
I think we all do. But
Yeah.
at the same time, we're not surprised with what he says, especially when he is so petty. I heard, in fact, on the same show, I forgot the guy's name. He was the chief of staff for DHS in Trump's first term. And he told the story about when John McCain passed away. And so whoever the head of DHS at the time was off on a trip to Arizona someplace. Obviously, his chief of staff was with him. And like a day after McCain passed away, now, he was a sitting senator, POW, served in the Navy, shot down,
One of the first.
POW for many years, kind of a national war hero. Had the chance, because his dad was a very high ranking admiral at the time, had the chance to get out and go home early
Mhm.
because North Vietnam was going to let him out just to try
Yeah.
to curry favor with the American. And he said no. Turn everybody else loose, but you're not turning me loose. So you had to give McCain some props. But
Yeah.
McCain did not vote with Trump on
Yep.
the Obamacare, and so Trump hated him after that. And so 2 days after McCain has passed away, and all the flags across the nation are at half mast, Trump calls up and says, put him back up." And the tradition is that they stay at half mast through the funeral,
Right.
and the funeral is not going to be for like another week.
Yeah.
And he said that told me everything I needed to know about Donald Trump that day. What a small petty person he is, and even in death, he's got to try to stick it to somebody that he thinks wronged him at
Exactly.
some point in time.
And, yeah,
And
I've never had nothing but respect for John McCain. Like I said, voted for Obama, but I wouldn't have been devastated if he had won. Same with Mitt Romney. I could have lived with either one of them. But the thing I remember most about John McCain is a man of honor. He was in all of these forums, and these people were standing up and going off about Obama and how immoral he was, and the birther thing and everything. And he'd say, "No, stop right there. We're not going to do that. He's a God-fearing good man. We're not going to do that. We're going to talk
yeah,
about other things."
Jonathan,
And 8 years later, we get Trump.
yeah. Jonathan, that Northwest Florida area is where you live now is so blessed to have so many wonderful retired military people living
Right.
there. And one of the most famous was Bud Day.
Exactly.
Bud was the longest serving POW, in our nation's history. One of the most highly decorated military people ever. A
Hmm.
Medal of Honor
Yep.
awarded for his service to the nation while a POW,
Yep.
and was John McCain's cellmate.
Yep.
When John McCain came into captivity, he was busted all to pieces from the ejection and also being beaten mercilessly by his captors. And Bud Day nursed him back to health. And I was honored to get to know Bud Day pretty well, become a friend of his.
Yeah.
Bud Day had nothing but good things to say about John McCain. Didn't always agree with his politics,
Right.
but he knew the character of the man.
Yeah.
And when Bud Day passed away, John McCain was on the plane immediately, was there, attended one of the largest funerals ever in the history of Northwest Florida. They had it
Hmm.
at the convention center down the island.
Yeah.
And they did a huge vehicle convoy funeral procession to Barrancas in Pensacola to bury him. It was, I mean, I was at the funeral. The convention center was packed out with people.
Exactly.
So it was,
To
but he
Donald.
he thought the world of John McCain.
Yep. But to Donald Trump, he was a loser. People that get
Yep,
captured are losers. I don't
yep.
want to,
I prefer for people that don't get caught.
yeah, and so, I don't know. It's beyond reason.
And that quote was passed on by Marine General John Kelly, who lost a son in Afghanistan, or a Marine general in his own right who was Trump's chief of staff, and a Gold Star father who lost a son in combat in Afghanistan.
Right.
So, it was not taken lightly.
No, yeah. So, and you just, there's no end to where this is going, but so it's getting about time to wind up, but I wanted to change subject a little bit.
All right.
So we're not going to talk about Donald Trump. I want to read this paragraph from the news story and then put it in perspective. So it's Dayton James Weber, 27, is accused of fatally shooting the front seat passenger of his vehicle during an argument in La Plata, Maryland on Sunday, and then fleeing to Virginia, according to Charles County Sheriff's Office. So you ask, well, what's so that happens every day? Well, let's put this perspective that Dayton James Weber is also a cornhole champion. He's also a quadruple amputee. He has no hands, no feet. How do you play? Well, we saw a picture how he does cornhole, but how do you drive a car and how do you fire a pistol?
Yeah, I have questions.
And the story that gives no explanation about how this happened, but you see the picture, he's got stumps, where
Yeah.
he's throwing a
You sent
cornhole
that
bag
you
with,
sent that article you sent that article to me, and I just shook my head reading it. There were two guys in the back seat,
yeah,
and after he shot the dude, he asked the two guys to help him dispose of the body, and they refused to.
yeah.
And they got out of the car and found the cops.
But how do you
I
drive a
know
car
everybody.
when you're quadruple
I know.
amputee?
I
That's
know. I know. I know. Everyone's presumed innocent, but I want to know how you pulled the trigger. I mean, what kind of a setup did you have that you could still hold a weapon and fire a weapon? I mean, and for those looked like the picture, basically amputated at the elbows, so he
yes,
was like this. We saw him holding a beanbag for cornhole, and he was like this, holding it. Well, how are you going to hold a gun like that?
and pull the trigger.
And you don't have toes. You don't have toes or your feet to pull the trigger. So, how do you hold it? How do you fire it? I've got questions.
I don't know,
So
sometimes things you see in the news just kinda, like, grab your attention, and as soon as I s
that was weird.
just the headline alone, "Quadruple amputee, cornhole champion facing murder charges in fatal shooting," and I'm like, "What?" And so I read it, and it's like, "Is this The Onion?" I mean, is this
Yeah,
but
is that real?
it's
Well,
legit, but I'm
don't
just
mean it. Don't mean to make light. Obviously, somebody died there,
no,
but I've got questions. I've got questions how that all happened.
I've got a I've got like I said, and I read the entire article, and they give no implication of how he pulled that off. I'm still wondering how he drove a car,
I tell
um,
you what, Jonathan,
or how
if
he
that
pulled the
trial winds
body out and dumped it in a yard.
I tell you what, if that trial winds up on court TV, I'm going to watch it because I have questions.
So I'm wondering if this is the most ludicrous frame job I've ever perpetrated
Maybe,
or something.
well, but I mean, they had to have something. I mean, if it was the two guys in the back, surely the cops who were actually there are going to have the same questions we have. How did you do that? Because
Yeah,
that's going to be I mean, if I was his defense attorney, that's be the first reasonable doubt. It's like my guy got no hands and got no feet. He can't hold a gun. He can't fire a weapon. So
officer, were
how
you
can he
able
shoot him?
to obtain any powder burns? It's every path I go down, I get this comic puzzle, and of course, like you said, someone died. It's not comic, but this makes no
I got
sense. I
questions.
mean,
I got
so I'm gonna
questions.
keep my eyes on this one.
We're gonna
It's
keep our eyes on that one for sure.
yeah. So maybe by next week we'll have an answer or something.
Yeah. Hey, before we sign up for the night, it's Tuesday. Special election in Florida for the Florida legislature, and good news for your party. They flipped a representative seat and a Senate seat that had been held by Republicans.
Yeah.
And one of the seats in the House is the same district that Mar-a-Lago is in. Both these districts, as I heard the reporting, Trump won both districts in the presidential election by substantial margins,
Right.
and a Democrat has now flipped that seat. So more bad news for Republicans headed into the midterms, as I see
Well,
it.
yeah, but I mean, in the grand scheme, it's still a supermajority in both houses of the Florida legislature. But
Yeah, but it's sending it. if I am a Republican, if I was in leadership, if I was
Mhm.
trying to get my, if I was trying to make sure that we kept a majority in the House, a majority in the Senate, I should be paying attention to shockwaves that are coming.
Well, I
Because
think
when
they
you
do.
start flipping you're flipping suites, you're flipping districts and flipping seats that Republicans have held for many years. Now, this one in the Florida House in the Mar-a-Lago area, that has been held by a Democrat, but it's been since 2010,
Mhm.
so 16 years. And
Right.
again, Trump won the district in the presidential. That's where Mar-a-Lago is, and it although it was tight, but it was still a win for the Democrats. So it's
Yeah. Well, I think the Republican leadership knows it's a problem. The problem is how do you get your party leader to act accordingly? They can't control him. It's the other piece of news the other day is Talrico is ahead of Paxton and the other guy outside of the margin of error in Texas right now.
yeah, it's another interesting thing that Trump has yet to endorse either Cornyn or Paxton in that Senate race, and they're having to raise the money and spend the money to fight each other, and that's what Trump was supposedly trying to avoid.
Hmm.
And Cornyn is just doing everything he possibly can to kiss up to Trump to get his endorsement.
Right.
I know John Cornyn. I've been a couple of times. He was really good friends with Alex Sanchez, who was the head of the Florida Bankers Association. We obviously do a lot of lobbying. When I was in the banking world, we did a lot of lobbying in D.C. Florida is the fifth largest state in the country, and banking is very important to Florida and on the national stage. And Alex and Cornyn just kind of struck up a friendship, and this lasted for 20 plus years. And we had leadership dinners for him, and he would come down and speak to us, and we would always go visit him while we were in DC. He's a nice guy. He's really gotten old though. And but you could just sense the desperation of him to hold on to power and hold on that seat for at least one more term. And it's really kind of sad
Hmm.
what he's had to give up because I've always considered him to be one of the more moderate Republicans in the Senate, but he is kissing Trump's ass right now, trying to get that endorsement. But Trump
Yeah.
still won't endorse. And
Well, you've got Paxton too, who was impeached by a supermajority Republican legislature
yep,
and barely wasn't convicted.
yep.
That he's a party leader now in that state.
Well, the Democrats are putting all their money behind Tallarico, and the Republicans they're having to spend money to fight each other.
Well, I think too, Tallarico is pushing some buttons most Democrats haven't pushed in Texas in a long time. So he's a moderate, he's a pastor, he's very articulate speaker. You know, he's everything most of the other candidates haven't been. So I mean, right now he's 6 to 8 points ahead of either one in Texas.
Interesting.
And that, it's
Interesting.
early, but still, it is. And there've been a lot of most of the special elections this year have gone blue.
Yep.
And one or two more congressional special elections, and Republicans would lose their majority in the House because they've seated three Democrats since the last election.
Yeah.
In fact,
I want to say that I think the majority is only one right now.
I think so
So,
because for a long time Johnson wouldn't swear in the lady that won in Arizona and finally
yep.
had to. So yeah, one more special election loss, depending on how you look at it, and it's a tie vote.
Yep.
And it's not like the Senate where you have a tiebreaker like called the vice president. It's
Yeah,
just
that's
a
right.
tie vote. You just hope
That's right.
someone stayed home sick that day.
Exactly.
That I mean, if when we talk about then the theme of this show is the threat to our republic that Trump and his cronies represent, the most obvious first chance to hopefully thwart that is a blue wave in November. I mean, Republicans
Yeah.
might not want to hear that, but if you don't like Trump, that's probably your best bet. You can maybe get
Yep.
rid of him and then try to win it back 2 years from now.
Yep.
But, at the moment, he's got to have some restrictor plates, some brakes, and Johnson and Thune are not providing those right now. So,
One last thing before we sign off, I've been beating my chest over this abomination known as Christian nationalism.
Uh-huh.
And we saw it raise its ugly head again with Donald Trump just yesterday. He's all in about the Save America Act, and so he tweeted, or he true social, whatever you're supposed to call it, that he doesn't want the Senate to go into recess. He wants them to stay in town so they can pass the Save America Act, because it's supposed to be a 2-week Easter break. They're supposed to go home
Mhm.
the end of this week, have next week with their constituents, go to church with their families on Sunday to the extent that they're Christians and believe that faith. But that's the whole point of that Easter break in the Congress. Trump wants them to stay there to pass the Save America Act, and didn't space it. He said in his little tweet, "Do it for Jesus." And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's Christian nationalism. We've now wrapped voter ID / voter suppression around the axle of Christianity. And we're now telling people, don't celebrate Easter. Don't go to your homes. Don't go to your families. Don't celebrate what is arguably, I mean, to me as a Christian, Easter is a bigger deal than Christmas. I mean, Christmas is a big
Obviously.
deal, but Christmas has gotten so secular because of Santa Claus and whatnot. And Easter Bunny is pretty secular too. But the resurrection of a
Yeah.
Christ conquering death,
That's mission
showing
accomplished.
His power. I
Yep.
mean, that is the hope. That is the hope. That is the faith. That is the bedrock of the Christian faith.
Right.
And you just can't denigrate that. That is, to me, that is the holiest. We talked earlier before we started working tonight about why is Sunday the Sabbath for the Christians and Saturday is the Sabbath for the Jews. Well, because that's the Jewish calendar, but Sunday was the day of resurrection. That's why Christians celebrate Sunday as their Sabbath.
Right.
And every Sunday is arguably an Easter. That's the way it's supposed to be, at least.
Huh.
And I just couldn't help but think, that bright neon flashing light, Christian nationalism. You know, you're not a Christian unless you believe in Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Unless you're pushing Trump's agenda. Jesus is not happy with you. And pardon my French, but that's just total bullshit.
Well,
Jesus doesn't need Donald Trump.
I think, it comes more about I think of the Who's rock opera Tommy, but like, at what point in MAGA world does Trump morph into the Messiah? We don't need Jesus, we got Trump.
Yeah. Well, didn't he put an AI picture of himself as Christ
Yeah.
out on True Social a few months ago?
Yeah,
So
no.
yeah, he didn't care.
There's always
No,
that.
it was as the Pope. He had himself as the Pope.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's what it was. Same, yeah.
But they had the hot mic moment last week where he told a fundraising group, supposedly be thought behind closed doors, but he said the only way we're going to win midterms is if the SAVE Act passes. So that's what that's about. And I saw some commentators talking about that, like even going back years ago, for years, Republicans have a better chance of winning when there's lower turnout. But if you keep even more people from voting, especially women, African Americans, Hispanics, everybody except white Christian men, your chances of winning go up exponentially. So that's, and you still can't get MAGA people to wrap their heads around. They don't read the act. They just, oh, all you need is a voter ID. Why do you have a problem with a voter ID?
Yeah.
Read the
I had a I
bill.
had a I had a good friend. He's a MAGA guy. And even though I have been kind of putting on this on my personal Facebook page for several weeks now, I mean, he basically just kind of bowed up on me and said, "Look, all they got to have is real ID." It's like, no, go back and read the act.
Yeah,
Go ask Chat GPT. Don't trust me. Go research it yourself. Your
yeah,
real ID, unless it states on your driver's license, on your state issued ID card, US citizen,
mhm,
it does not count, because there are a gazillion green card holders or in this that are permanent residents of this country but are not citizens that have real ID.
yep,
You can get a real ID and not be a US citizen. So no, real ID does not count. Nowhere in the proposed legislation does it say real ID counts. Now it'll count for ID to vote. It does not count for ID it does not count as proof of citizenship when you register to vote, or if you change your registration in any way, change of address, change of name,
Yeah.
you have to prove citizenship every time
Yeah.
unless they keep up with it. If the state keeps up with it, fine. Yeah, I had another friend reposted something that may or may not be true. I don't know, but it was somebody that posted like, I just wanted to see how hard it was. So I ordered a copy of my birth certificate, my marriage license, my social security card, and they listed the 5 or 6 things. They got it all in 2 weeks. It was all express mail. It cost total of $20. Fine, good for you. You're probably an intelligent person,
Mhm.
but if you struggle to read, which a lot of people do still in this country,
Yep.
uh, if you're a lower income, you may not have $20. My response was, whether it's $2, $20, or $200 or $2,000, it should not cost you $1. It should not cost you one penny to
Mhm.
vote in this country,
Right.
because voting is a right.
We got rid of
It
the
is a
poll tax.
constitutionally guaranteed right. A driver's license, driving is a privilege. You're not automatically guaranteed you're going to drive. You got to pass a test. You got to keep the points off your license. You can't speed, can't drive drunk. There are lots of things you can do to get your license taken away. Can't get your right to vote taken away unless you commit a felony.
Right.
And so people that move, mostly renters, mostly lower income, because more
Yeah.
renters are lower income. They're the ones that move more often than homeowners do. Women, obviously, these are areas that Trump does not strongly poll with. And I'm telling you, anything that is a hassle to someone voting,
Mhm.
we need to not have.
Well, and
I mean,
that's kinda goes to some experiences I've had on the Democratic side. I've seen it in firsthand in Escambia County because there aren't many, in Santa Rosa. Every 2 years, it's before the election, there's a huge drive to, 1, make sure African American voters didn't get purged off the rolls, and 2, get them on the voter records. And they go house to house almost, churches help, but they find African Americans that don't even have a driver's license or even, one of those ID cards you can get from the state, because they hardly ever go out. They just a lot of them have medical issues and things where they just don't trust the government. They don't think their vote's gonna count, and so there's a lot of people that just don't, so they're not gonna go through these hoops. So, yeah, and, a lot of them don't have birth certificates. Some of them were born at home and it was never registered. There's a lot of, we talk about white privilege, but it is a real thing in a lot of ways, and I've seen it, and especially in this case, you can disenfranchise a lot of African American voters with this, or even not allow new ones to even be able to register. So
the
it's a contrived plan, as also the SAVE Act is.
well, my argument was it's against the law to commit voter fraud to begin with.
Hmm.
It's against state law. It's already against federal law. Federal law already says you must be a citizen to vote.
Yeah.
Now, we've always just allowed someone to claim that they're a citizen under the threat of perjury. I mean, you're taking an oath, you're
Hmm.
swearing you're a citizen. So if you're lying, you committed perjury. That is a federal offense. It's a federal law. Why can't why can't our Justice Department, if it is voter fraud, if illegals voting is such a massive problem, so huge
Hmm.
that we have to pass a new law to enforce an old law,
Right.
which is kind of what it boils down to. Why can't we just sit Pam Bondi on it, sit Cash Patel on it? Hey, There's millions of people. One friend said there's 21 million illegals that voted in the last election. That's like, where did you get that from? He said, well, I saw Chuck Schumer say this was going to disenfranchise 21 million voters. It's like, no, he's talking about something completely different.
Mhm.
He's talking about people that have had to change their name, have had to change their address, and the hassle they're going to have to go through to prove that they're a citizen by getting copies of birth certificates. Only half the only half the American citizens of voting age in this country have passports. So otherwise, they've got to go get a birth certificate, and it has to be a certified copy. Can't just be a photographic copy. Got to be a
Right.
certified copy of the. Look, I have no earthly idea where my birth certificate is. I'm sure it was in some of my mama's stuff, and it's probably not a problem when you're 18 because you're probably at least your mom's probably usually alive. Your moms, the moms are always ones that keep up with that stuff for their
Right.
kids, right?
Yep.
When you're 60 years old, do you still have your birth certificate? I haven't had to have mine in 100 years.
Mhm.
I don't think I had to have it for my. Maybe I had to have it for my passport. I don't know. I've had my passport for so long, I don't
Usually you
remember
have
now.
to
Maybe I
for the
did.
passport, yeah.
Well, that's probably the last time I saw my birth certificate. Then,
Yeah. And,
so
I just went jumping through hoops with all of that stuff to get where the expedited through TSA, so I don't have to
yeah,
do.
good luck with that.
No, I got it. Now I go through the short line instead of the longer line, but I had to, it was, passport, driver's license, and birth certificate, and it was a process. But, the whole point was that the only now, obviously, I don't know how long it would take to get through the expedited line because TSA's short funded. But, it's it's an obvious attempt if you're willing to look objectively to alter the course of elections in favor of one party. Don't know how
Well,
to put it.
if I was the Democrats, honestly, I would just slip. I would sit back and say, "Hey, we're not going to vote for it, but we're also not going to propose. We're not going to fight it either. Hey, Republicans, this is Hobby Lobby. You break it, you own it.
Mhm.
So, you alienate these millions of voters like that. Of course, I guess that they're not voting unless the Democrats can mobilize them. They get them, pissed off about it, and they can mobilize them
Yeah,
and turn them into voters. But
but then you have a
I
short
think
window of time to do it, so
they do. Yeah, Trump wants it all before the midterm. So I don't see how the states. Can you imagine how many requests for birth certificates might come in between now and the midterms? Just people trying to get their birth certificates so they can register, so they can prove their registration.
it took my daughter
It
30
was
days to get
swamp it.
hers for a passport, so because 'cause we're taking on
Yeah,
a cruise in 2 months, and it
yeah.
was yes, it's
And that's just normal. Just imagine if all of a sudden you had 20 million people trying to get it all of a sudden.
I think it needs to be challenged on the grounds of the 1965 Voting Act. I mean,
Yeah.
we did
Well, it's
away with
Jim
poll
Crow.
tax, we did away with literacy tests, we did away with
This
all
is
those
this is this is
segregationist
this is
roadblocks to voting.
this is nothing but a throwback to Jim Crow.
Exactly,
Throwback to
because
Jim Crow.
'cause no matter what you wanna say, and you can trot out all of the Byron Donalds and the others out there that are Republicans, but the majority of African Americans still vote Democratic. It's so how do you offset that? You keep it where they can't vote. I mean, although then to be honest, it's not a good turnout crowd anyway. It did for in some instances. It was kind of odd. More African Americans turned out to vote for Joe Biden than vote for Kamala Harris.
Mhm.
Real
Mm.
fact, and a lot of that, and I'm not trying to typecast, but there is a strong kind of a misogynist factor with a lot of African American
Yeah.
men. I mean, with everybody. It's so they'd said in the polling they weren't going to vote for the woman. Didn't matter if she was black.
Yeah.
So they voted for Joe Biden because they knew that he had their back.
Yeah.
They voted for Obama because he was the male. But it's not a great turnout demographic. It never has been.
Well, Kamala had a hard time putting two sentences together too that made sense.
Yeah,
She was pretty famous for the word salad. Kind of like Pete. Kind of like
yeah. But it's Most African American friends will look at me and say, I don't vote. I don't believe in it because I don't think my vote counts. So that's a very common theme. I hate that, but I can't
Well, it
really,
counts.
in
Well,
some
it
way, I can't
counts.
really dissuade them either. So it does count. Well, I mean, that was really what turned 2020 for Biden was all those people that felt Donald Trump, what harm can he do in 4 years? They came to that realization and they turned out. They talk about, oh, all these voter fraud in Michigan and, all these urban areas. It wasn't that. It was that, like, I gotta get my vote out and ask and vote this clown
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
But then after 4 years of not having him, they forgot and they didn't turn out for Kamala. So it's a shame, but it is what it is. But it's if you read the SAVE Act, you realize it's disenfranchising women and minorities,
yep, yep.
plain and
It's
simple.
true.
It just
No
is what
question
it
about
is.
it. No question.
So anyway, we appreciate everyone tuning in tonight as usual.
Mhm.
We, leave your comment, like our page, let us know what you think. But so next week we'll do it all over again. I'm sure we'll have plenty more to talk about then.
Always do.
Always do. And leave in your comments any subjects you want discussed. We're more than happy to do that. So I'm gonna bid everyone good night. Good night, Tony. As always, appreciate
Good
you
night. See you
jumping in.
next week.
See you next week, and
All right.
everyone, thank you from the Guardians of the Republic.
Take care.
Thanks.